Hi, welcome to week 4 of our Make the Shift Growth Group series, and this week our shift is from consumer to steward. And so we wanted to do something really special for you all this week as a growth group, kind of a little icebreaker activity for you. And so if you read the chapter, you know that they start off by talking about Joey Chestnut, who's this competitive hot dog eater. And it's an insane story how many hot dogs he eats. But what we wanted to do is give you a chance to get that up close and personal with this idea of consumerism. And so we've stocked your growth group leaders' pantries and fridges with hundreds and hundreds of hot dogs. And what we want you to do is start off your group today just by having your own little eating contest within your group and see who can consume the most hot dogs in 10 minutes. Ready? I'm just kidding. I am a youth pastor. I like to have a lot of fun, but we're not going to put you through that today. But what I do want to say is that I watched a documentary about Joey Chestnut even before this book or this series came about, and he puts in a lot of work to be that good at consuming hot dogs. You might be surprised to know that he exercises every day. He does these challenges where he exercises his jaw muscles and his throat and learns to control his stomach. All of this is a lot of work that he puts in to be the best at what he does, and it pays off because this July 4th, he was in this competition where he made a record and he consumed 76 hot dogs and their buns. So he puts in a lot of work to be this good at consuming. But unfortunately for us, it doesn't often take a lot of work or conscious effort on our part to become consumers. It's kind of built into what it is to be a human or what our American culture has taught us to be. But it will take us some work to shift from that consumer mindset back to a mindset of stewardship. So this morning in our sermon, I started off with the easy button and said a lot of commercials, a lot of things we see in the world are marketing to us as consumers, and they're saying, buy this product, do this thing, your life will be easier, your life will be better, your life will be more satisfying if you do this. And we went on to learn that God's marketing strategy to us is very different. God cares about our souls, and he's not as much about our life being easy as he is about our life being fruitful. And we look at a parable in Matthew 25 about this master who is going on a trip, and so he entrusts some of his money to his servants. And we see two of them start to invest that money and make a good return, and one of them chooses to dig a hole in the ground and bury the money because he's scared of what might happen. And in the end, when the master comes back, he's most pleased with the two faithful servants, he calls them, who have made a return on the investment and who have been fruitful with the money. So we learn a few things from this parable. Number one, that we are only temporary stewards of our possessions. God has entrusted us with them, but really they're his. And so what we do with them is really important to him. Number two, when God entrusts us with something, there's this inherent sense of responsibility. We need to steward them well. And then number three, when the master comes back at the end of the story, it's time to give account for what you've done. And this is also going to happen to us. One day, God, our master, is going to come back, and we're going to need to give an account for what we have done. And so the book also gives us these 3 steps of how we can move kind of deeper in stewardship of our resources, from just spending to ending up with generosity. And one of the first, they call these kind of mini shifts. The first one of those is from spending to saving. And one of my favorite ways to do this, it might seem a little outside the box at first, is to go thrift shopping. And you're like, wait, you're supposed to be not spending money and you're going shopping? But here's how it works. I love to meet our family's needs in a frugal way because everybody needs clothes and kitchen appliances and shoes and those kinds of things. But when I meet those needs in a frugal way, it frees up the rest of our money to pay our bills or to tithe or to be generous to other people with the finances that we have. So that's the first one. Then we move from just saving to giving. And like I said, this is something that no matter how much money you have, you can start. You can start that pattern and that rhythm of giving regularly to God from your resources, no matter what it is. Just create that habit. Oil tycoon John D. Rockefeller says, I never would have been able to tithe the first $1 million I made if I had not tithed my first salary, which is $1.50 per week. So we move from saving to giving. And then the final mini shift that they ask us to make is from giving to blessing. And the difference between just giving and blessing is they would consider this something beyond the 10% that you give to the church. They would say this is a step of generosity, of giving sacrificially. And so something I would encourage you to do in your groups today is just to think about and maybe even share with each other where you feel you are in those 3 mini shifts, or how God has stretched you or how you've grown in those areas over the past few years. Or maybe you can encourage each other just by sharing stories of how God's been faithful In my sermon, I shared my story about tithing throughout my college years and how God really came through for me. And so if you've never given God that opportunity to stretch you and show you his faithfulness, I would encourage you to try that out. It's super scary and it's super awesome to see what he does. Another encouragement for you today would just be to make it super practical. Maybe you're sharing your money saving tips. Maybe you share about ministries that you're giving to and that you believe in, and you want to get other people on board with that. Or if you want to get really bold, you can have a budget review session. In the olden days, believe it or not, Brethren in Christ pastors and deacons from congregations would go around once a year and they would visit their congregation members and ask them about their finances. And that might seem super invasive, and I'm not telling you that we have to do this, but we know that they took very seriously this command of Jesus regarding stewardship and living simply and being accountable to the church in how we're handling our money. So those are some things to consider. I want to wrap up by just pointing us to the portion of Philippians we're going to be reading today, which is in Philippians 4. And he says, one of the best things we can do to develop this attitude of stewardship is to foster contentment. And this helps us battle the consumerism culture. So in Philippians 4, Paul tells us contentment is really key to this. And Philippians 4:13 is a verse lots of people know. It says, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And that's awesome, but a lot of times we take it out of context and we say like, wow, I can make the basketball team because God will give me the strength. Or I can finish this marathon because God will give me the strength. Or I can make it through this tough time because God will give me the strength. And God is with us in those tough times. But what Paul's really referring to is the ability to be content in every situation. He says that's what God gives him the strength to do. God allows him to have this contentment that is so far beyond any of his physical circumstances. Charles Spurgeon says, you say, if I had a little bit more, then I would be content, then I would be satisfied. But you make a mistake. If you're not content with what you have, you would not be satisfied, even if it were doubled. So there's something really important about just cultivating the spirit of contentment that will allow us to part with our possessions easier, to become better stewards. So as you read and you discuss Philippians together today as a group, ask God to start making this shift in you from consumer to steward.